And this book supposedly it was going to tell how the universe could have a meaning, a purpose, even though there's nothing supernatural. And I was like, this sounds like a book for me. So I got the
sounds
book,
like a cope to me, but yeah.
When I started working on figuring out what was in the lost pages, I had lost my faith. When these sources collapsed for me and I already had other questions.
And you wanted to sin.
Yeah, of course, right? No.
Lazy learner.
Oh my God.
I was offended by this kid named Arden. I don't know. I don't know what happened to that guy.
He was real young.
He's probably in prison now. I don't know. But and so, that made me want to leave and sin, actually. It made me want to sin.
We are grabbing those third rails. We're not just touching them. We are grabbing them and shaking them. Don Bradley, ladies man.
And the last thing the stake president said to me was he had a feeling I would be back. He thinks this is more likely than God? Like, I hadn't believed in God, but this sounded whack.
Richard Dawkins is proof of how stupid humanity is.
Oh my God.
No. We all just believe him.
That's exactly what I was saying, Cardin.
You just throw a good English accent at some guy and then tell him to start mocking religious groups, and all of a sudden, I don't want to be mocked. Yeah, I believe you and science because you're in a suit with an English accent. Dude, that is so awesome.
Something to know, okay? Even though when I first wondered what was in the lost pages, I was a primary kid, right? When I started working on figuring out what was in the lost pages, I had lost my faith, okay?
Really?
So I actually, so we can talk in other episodes, future episodes, right? More about my faith journey and so on. But
well, now you just got to do it. We'll go into bonus materials for the members. That just do it. Keep it flowing. We're vibing. This is good, man. This is good.
Okay. So I wanted to understand more about the Book of Mormon and know more about like what was in those lost pages, but I had lost my faith. All right. I had stopped believing. I started doing church history research when I was 17. So that's when I started when I first went to the church archives, I was 17 years old.
Wow.
I went
That's
there
where all the girls
to,
right? Dude, Don Bradley, ladies man, at the church office building.
If there had been another girl, if there had been a girl there my age, I would have been like, wow, right? I would love at first sight, right? But no, that never happened. I was there studying the origins and demise of the Adam God theory. That's what I first went there to study as a teenager.
So some kids go super geek and play D&D. Some get into Magic the Gathering. Others join chess club. You go research the rise and fall of the Adam God theory.
At 17.
At 17. Do you know, it sounds like Moroni. He was a sober child.
Dude,
running the armies.
Yeah, just seriously. Like,
that was a sober child.
That level of a guy,
Okay, Don. Wow, these members, they're getting more than they bargained for signing up for membership on our channel. Keep going.
So, around that time, my dad took us for family home evening. He took us to Deseret Book and offered to buy us each a book. Church book. Mm-hmm. And so there between like Boyd K. Packer and Joseph Fielding Smith, I found a book by B.H. Roberts, Studies of the Book of Mormon, which, as you guys probably know, and a lot of listeners might know, that was B.H. Roberts. He was, of course, a general authority back in the day, right?
An apostle.
30s. Mm-hmm. 70, president of 70,
With a killer mustache.
At that time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So he decided to make a kind of devil's advocate case against the Book of Mormon. He was really trying to, in modern terms, like steel man.
That's not true. That's not true. The 12 were pressuring him to not tell his academic truth, and the truth. It was hidden, and I know because I watched a podcast.
Garden.
That's how it goes.
Your anti-Mormon voice is so desperate.
You've completely caught the wave of Don's vibe.
It's like, dude.
Totally.
Okay, so keep going.
So I found this book. It just looked like a really cool book. The buyers at Deseret clearly had no idea what this book was, or they would never have bought it. So
Oh,
I don't know
fascinating.
how long it was before they yanked it from the shelf. I'm probably the only teenager in the church who bought this book.
Wow.
Like, I mean, it was published many decades after B.H. Roberts died by the University of Illinois, right?
Yeah.
But Deseret, like I said, they didn't know what they had. So I took it home. It just like blew me away, right? Because this is B.H. Roberts. This wasn't like Gerald and Sandra Tanner or something. So I didn't have my guard up.
Yeah.
And
So it was good scholarship, is what you're saying.
well, he laid out for the time that he was writing, people had really had the hemispheric model of, Book of Mormon geography.
yeah.
And his arguments really are devastating to that model.
Yeah.
But at the time, there wasn't really another model.
So devastating that we don't even think that anymore. Like
Right.
very, very few
Right,
people
right,
even
right,
have that model.
Right.
Only the cool people still believe.
But it's really only been in the last couple decades that the limited geography became like a more dominant viewpoint.
Right.
Like 20 years ago, I was asking people, LDS friends and family, like, well, which model they understood, and they were almost all saying hemispheric, right? So
really, even as recently as 20 years.
yeah.
Wow.
So when at this time when I was 17, right, like limited geography was out there, but it wasn't well accepted. It hadn't spread far. So this just like threw everything into question for me. Was if the Book of Mormon might not be true, was there a God? Christ, life after death.
Yeah.
And so over the years, I kept studying, right? And I was able to kind of reconcile things for a while from my mind, but I kept doing research, and I was finding more and more things that didn't match with what I had started out believing. And so there were a few documents that I trusted. There were these historical sources that seemed to show that like Joseph Smith had real miraculous events in his life, and he made like spot on prophecies and so on. And one document was supposed to be the journal of Sarah Stoddard, who was in Nauvoo, talked about this miraculous event. And I thought, well, it's a journal from somebody who was there at the time. They're recording this miraculous event. This must be totally legit. And then there were these documents from letters and journals and stuff from the family of Joseph Smith's brother, Samuel Harrison Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had all these like exact prophecies that Joseph Smith gave. And these documents were both handed down through the families of this one was handed down through the family of Samuel H. Smith, his descendants. And so I thought, well, wow, these are really strong evidence for the restoration. Well, then when I looked into them more, I already had a lot of doubts and questions. When I looked into these more to try to verify them, I discovered that both of these sets of documents are actually forgeries.
Really?
The families actually created the sources. In this, for the Stoddard Journal, I think the woman actually remembered a family story that she thought was from a journal, but she couldn't find the journal, so she tried to recreate the journal without saying she was recreating it. So she wasn't trying to be a forger, but she was, right?
Yeah.
And then in the other case, the descendant of Samuel Harrison Smith, he, as a young man, he converted from the LDS to the RLDS church. Then he converted back to the LDS church in his old age. And
That whipped cream temple it's tempting.
It's a seashell.
The seashell temple. That's tempting. I could see. You know what I'm saying? And also, who are the guys that still have the OG gangster Kirtland temple? I think that's gorgeous.
The Hendrickites, man.
Is that
Temple
who it is?
lot.
No, the Nauvoo.
It's
actual
the community of
Kirtland?
Christ.
No, the Community of Christ. Yeah, see, they got the
They have
OG
Kirtland.
Kirtland
Oh,
temple.
you're right.
Yeah.
And that was the top 10
okay.
architectural buildings of North America of the 19th century. And I think it's gorgeous, more gorgeous than some of the others that will remain nameless. So, they've got at least a strong architectural claim.
You should never bash the Provo Temple that way, okay?
Okay.
That birthday cake is
Yes.
there for a reason, and it's being demolished.
It
for a
looks
reason.
like the wheels on that electric truck Elon Musk is making.
Look, it's symbolic of the cloud and the pillar of fire. But yeah,
It's the mothership of the alien.
Right.
We did do a podcast on the 1978 and Eldon Tanner talk, Warnings from Outer Space. It was
an
pretty wicked.
awesome talk.
Yeah,
So
dude. You're
saying
missing out.
Aliens brought the Provo Temple? Is that what you're
Dude,
saying?
yeah.
Look, it is a spaceship,
It kind of is.
allegedly.
Allegedly.
I have heard.
Okay, so keep going, Don.
So I ended up leaving the church. I stayed in the church for a while. So when these sources collapsed for me, and I already had other questions,
And you wanted to sin.
Yeah, of course, right? No,
Lazy
but
learner.
Oh my god.
You're gonna
I was offended by this kid named Arden. I don't know. I don't know what happened to that guy.
He was real young.
He's probably in prison now. I don't know. But and so, yeah, that made me want to leave and sin, actually. It made me want to sin.
we are grabbing those third rails. We're not just touching them. We are grabbing them and shaking them, Okay, keep going.
So I thought, someday I'm going to start publishing my church history stuff. And I thought, they're going to excommunicate me. I'd stopped believing in the church. I also stopped believing in God for a while. I became an atheist. And I thought, there's no place in the church for an atheist. I might want to contribute to this community, but I really can't, and I had started seeing Joseph Smith as an opportunist. And so I decided I would, in essence, excommunicate myself from the church rather than waiting for them to do it someday. So I put in a letter resigning my membership. And in order to make it so that
Don, how old were you?
I was like in my early 30s at that point.
Oh, wow.
I decided I wanted to bar that door shut behind me. I actually thought someday I might want to come back to the church, but I thought, but there's no way that this is true, and I need to prevent myself from doing that. And so in my letter, I bore my anti-testimony. I laid out the reasons why I thought it wasn't all true, and I thought, well, that'll keep me from coming back.
The rough draft of the CES letter.
Right. If I try to come back, I thought then they'll want to know, well, what about all these things
It's like the
you
reverse of the young women that put on the stupid little list what they want in their husbands, what we fortunately have culturally gotten rid of. You know what I'm saying? But you were doing like the reverse of that for your faith. Okay.
Right. So, and I put in my letter, I put, along with these other concrete reasons, I put, and I'm leaving because it just isn't true. I was bearing my anti-testimony, right? And I added in there to make sure that this would be kept confidential because I was living in Utah and my employer was LDS and my landlords were LDS and so on. I thought to help keep it all confidential and to make sure that they wouldn't let me back, I threatened to sue the church if it wasn't kept, my leaving wasn't kept confidential.
Meek and mild.
And so I thought there's no way they will ever let me back, right? So that was what I wanted at the time. So I put in my letter, I actually hand delivered it to the bishop. I didn't want to duck out on meeting with him.
Like a real man.
Like it was,
you did your self-excommunication bareback, yeah.
What does that even mean?
Instead of doing that wimpy website where they do it for you and send a letter in, he marched in there. He's like, take my anti-testimony and run with it. Yeah, what do you think of these apples? You know?
You know when I did it? Pioneer Day.
Oh, man. Savage, dude.
So
well, the reason why I knew you were a crappy inactive anyway is because you didn't make a long Facebook post bemoaning your wholesome upbringing as some kind of horrible patriarchal experience.
And listing every calling you've ever had as your authority for how you know so much more.
Wow. So we know that you were coming back anyway. We would have seen that on miles away because you didn't do it on Facebook. That's when it's real.
So I hand delivered the letter to the bishop because I didn't want to duck out on. I knew that the church would. I read online, like on xmormon.org, how to do a letter. And they said they will want you to meet with your local leaders. Don't do it. They're just going to try to talk you out of it. And I thought, well, if the church feels like that's part of the process, I don't want to duck out of that just because it would be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I hand delivered the letter to the bishop on Pioneer Day, And then he said, the stake president's going to want to meet with you too. And I said, that's fine. And so they both talked with me, right? I met with the stake president later. And the last thing the stake president said to me was he had a feeling I would be back.
Wow.
You probably hated that at the time.
Well,
yeah.
I knew I wasn't going to be back. But I didn't want him. I could tell my bishop and stake president they felt terrible about this. I could see it. And I knew why. I understood that in their mind this was huge consequences, hinged on this, eternal consequences.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to feel any more bad than they had to. And so when the stake president said that, I thought, in my mind quickly, I thought, like, well, that's never going to happen. But it's not logically impossible, like a married bachelor or something. And so I just thought, I'll tell him it's possible. So that's what I said. I said, it's possible. And I thought, never going to happen, but it's possible. Right?
That was
and
inspired.
So that was...
The Spirit was already working on
Don't
you.
glorify this person. No, what? Don't glorify. It's inspired.
It's possible that Carden wants to join the Church of Jesus Christ Bickerton night next week.
That's funny. It's part of the buyout. That's a negotiation chip. You know what I'm saying? We all agree on the name. We're trying to do this "Don't Call Us Mormon" thing.
Yeah.
Russell M. Nelson would be totally down with just calling it the Church of Jesus Christ. If you will, we promise to use your name. And then now you get access to all these great facilities. This is a mutual endeavor.
And we get their domain name, which would be great.
Yeah, we get the domain
No,
name
that's
back.
not the first swing at the domain name that's happened over the years.
I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not.
That's funny. Okay, keep going.
So I started my own kind of wandering in the wilderness, as I think of it now, spiritually. I tried out kind of like different, like I was an atheist, right? But I still wanted there to be some spiritual dimension to life. I wanted there to be a meaning to life. So I actually stumbled onto a book, was advertised in Skeptic magazine, which is like a magazine that's sort of against the supernatural. Michael Shermer, if you're familiar with him, he's the guy who runs
Yeah, he's
it,
one of the
but, like,
self-aggrandizing people that birthed wokeism and atheism 2.0, which really just turned into feminism. Yeah.
I just thought Michael Schur, the creator of The Office and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, you know.
Okay, cool, yeah.
So I was reading this magazine. They had an ad for a book called Biocosm. And this book purported, supposedly, it was going to tell how the universe could have a meaning, a purpose, even though there's nothing supernatural. And I was like, this sounds like a book for me. So I got the
Sounds
book,
like a cope
right?
to me, but
Wait, you're telling me I can have the semblance of godliness without the power thereof? Yes, bring it.
It's rock on, dude, rock on. Don, I'm so glad you're back. But like sometimes like it's hard for me to even think of the Apostle Paul. Like all of us venerate and love him so much. It's like this dude killed Stephen. You know what I'm saying? Like
No, he held the coats, bro. It was not.
Oh yeah, sorry. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't
Like,
do it, Carden. Stephen was already dead a long time earlier.
that's true. I'm personally offended. No, I'm just kidding. Let's keep going. Keep going, Doug.
So I read this book.
Yeah.
Right? And in the first half of the book, he lays out the fine-tuning of the universe for the existence of life.
Oh, yeah.
And he lays it out in detail. And I had known a little bit about this, but I hadn't really understood it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the fine-tuning of the universe for the existence of life is the idea that, and the observation that when we look at the universe, if the laws, fundamental laws of the universe were ever so slightly differently, there would be no life because there would be no stars. There'd be no galaxies. There'd be no stars.
Yeah.
Right? No source of energy for living things to exist. And so he showed using various scientists, not religious scientists, actually non-religious scientists, and the author was not religious, right?
Fascinating.
He showed that the odds of, so let me give an example. Gravity. If gravity were like a billionth part stronger, then all the matter in the early universe would have collapsed into black holes, no galaxies, no stars, no life. If gravity had been like a billionth part weaker, you would have no galaxies because the matter would just have distributed all throughout the universe instead of clumping together.
And my understanding is billionth is like being super generous.
Right.
Like that's being super generous.
It might be like a trillionth of a trillionth. part or
I wish
something.
it could be just a little bit less strong for the sake of my back, but I guess I'll accept it if it allows for life to exist.
Yeah, that's true.
It's stronger during the holidays.
All right, keep going, Doc.
Yeah.
So you could always go to Mars, man.
Oh, there you
Elon
go.
Musk.
Yeah,
There you go. Yeah. So actually, when you put this together for all the different constants or fundamental laws of the universe, the chances of the laws of the universe allowing the existence of life, if those laws had been set at random, are 1 in 10 to the 200th power. This is what was laid
It's
out in the
functionally
book.
zero.
It's functionally zero.
Right.
So just for context, there are about 10 to the 80th particles in the known universe.
Mm-hmm.
10 to the 200th is just like many times over.
Yeah.
that, right.
So many times over.
Yeah.
Right. And so basically it's like, we're not here, but somehow we are. And so then he went through the different explanations that scientists have offered for the fine tuning, and he shoots them down and even enlists Richard Dawkins to help him do this.
Oh,
Right?
fascinating.
Oh, yeah,
And
because
so
he's
he-
the
right.
smartest.
Man,
one of
to
the
New
bunch.
atheist.
Oh, yeah.
So he like levels these arguments, and then so I'm going into the second half of this book. I'm totally primed for like, what's the answer, right? I want
Yeah.
to know like why are we here? Why do we exist? Why is there any life?
Yeah.
And so then the author's answer is this theory that the universe was fine-tuned for the existence of life at the beginning by our distant descendants out in the future.
Oh,
That like
yeah.
time is a closed loop, and
Uh-huh.
like the universe like starts over when it ends or something. I was like,
No, I love it. I have this
What?
thing called the 30 rules of anti-Mormons. And one of them is always, it's what I call the Neil deGrasse Tyson effect, where they arrogantly tell you you're stupid for having a religion and then tell you to believe in the multiverse. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, all right, so we're stupid and believing in Jonah's whale, but unless I accept that all of time is Schrodinger's cat mixed with the Spider-Man multiverse, well, now I'm the smart guy in the room. All right, okay.
So
Right.
there's more evidence for the Book of Mormon than there is the resurrection. And then there's more evidence for the resurrection than there is for Big Bang. And there's more evidence for Big Bang than future time travelers creating a fine tuning of the universe. Right?
So when I saw this, like
that.
wait, this guy thinks this? Like he thinks this is more likely than God? Like I hadn't believed in God, but this sounded whacked.
Uh-huh.
This sounded totally nuts.
It almost sounds like he's saying God's going to evolve out of humans,
well,
right?
Yeah. Which is interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that is interesting. Like almost kind of sort of.
Well, and I feel like the Dawkins answer is just, well, aren't we lucky, basically?
Richard Dawkins is proof of how stupid humanity is.
Oh my God.
That no, we all just
That's not
believe
far off,
him.
though.
That's exactly what I was saying, Cardin.
You just throw a good English accent at some guy and then tell him to start mocking religious groups, and all of a sudden, oh, I don't want to be mocked. Yeah, I believe you and science because you're in a suit with an English accent. Like
Right.
Richard Dawkins and his fan base is proof that God created us so weak, he needed to give us adrenaline and the Book of Mormon. You know what I'm saying? Because so many people just flop over like lemmings for this guy. It's like all the chicks that voted for JFK in 1962 or whenever that election was because they thought he was the hottest one. My grandma voted for Bill Clinton because she thought he was handsome. You know what I'm saying?
He
And it's
was
like,
handsome.
I know, but it's like half these people just love Richard Dawkins because they don't want to be ridiculed by a professor with an English accent.
It's because they're blown about by every wind of doctrine because they don't have a basis.
I
Right?
prefer to reduce it into a cruel binary in which
Don't quote James to me.
okay. So I got something about Dawkins. Okay?
Yeah.
Dawkins on Mormonism.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that'll be fun.
So think about
Barking mad.
why is Dawkins famous in the first place before the new atheist stuff? That's made him hyper famous, right? But why was he famous?
Because
as a
boomers didn't do their
scientist,
job
right?
of raising their Gen X children who are then allowed to go to school and learn everything's the academic way instead of the religious way, and then bereft in a sea of foolishness because academics are always looking for the greatest, latest new thing. These children were lost under the guise that, oh no, I don't want to look stupid, and they're insinuating that I'm stupid if you believe in the faith. It's barking mad. You know, that's what happened.
So to summarize that, our education system sucks.
Yeah.
So Dawkins was an evolutionary biologist, right? That's his trade. So he actually originally became famous because of his selfish gene idea in biology, which is interesting, right? But then he extended that to the idea of memes, which now we know as like these social media units, right? But like the original idea of memes is he's arguing that just like you have biological evolution where genes pass themselves, the genes that multiply the most are the ones that are best at passing themselves on.
Yeah.
He said there are cultural equivalents of this. Let's call them memes.
Like
which
ideas.
means like memes are like replicators.
Like
They're cultural
altruism?
ideas. Well, yeah. So like a meme. So for instance, if there's a religion that tells its adherents have as many kids as possible, that's a good meme because it does a good job of spreading itself because those people's kids will probably be part of their same religion.
Wait, Richard Dawkins
And then-
invented the terminology memes?
He did.
Yes.
Yes,
Wow.
he did.
Oh, dang it. Now I got to give the guy more respect. Crap. You know what I'm saying?
So he did become famous initially before the atheism stuff for a reason, right? He had these interesting ideas, right? So Dawkins should be very attuned to the idea that some kinds of ideas are better at spreading themselves than others. So if you want to spread an idea,
Yeah.
you should do it in a way where the idea it has legs. It has a good ability to spread itself. So Dawkins once he was on like a TV show or something, and he was talking about the Mormon Bible, right? The Book of Mormon, and he talked about it came out in the 1800s, but it was in the King James language of the 1600s. And he was saying, like, how stupid is that? How obvious is that, right? That Joseph Smith was, like, so stupid that he put his Bible in the language of, like, 200 years earlier, okay? Now, think about...
Was that right before Joe Rogan said, well, actually, he was 14 years old when this happened? Oh, I didn't know that. You know, like, if you ever watch his art, he knows nothing about Mormonism while
nothing.
he dumps
He knows
on it.
but
Yeah.
zero.
But this is how dumb his criticism is, okay?
Yeah.
Because he's saying that when this book comes out in the 1800s, it should absolutely not be in the language of the King James Bible, right? Well, what was the language of Scripture to American Christians in the 1800s? It was the King James Bible. They all used the King James Bible.
Are you saying the Book of Mormon was the original Joseph Smith meme?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
The Book of Memes.
if you wanted the Book of Mormon to be taken seriously, it should be in the language that at the time for people was the language of Scripture. That's the language of the King James Bible. So if you just think like memes, like Richard Dawkins supposedly should be able to think since he came up with the idea,
Yeah.
you should be able to see a perfect reason why the Book of Mormon would be in the King James language. And yet Dawkins, for him, this is like, right? Because he doesn't bother to actually think about Latter-day Saint religious claims or any other religious claims.
No.
He just sets out to dismiss them.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway.
It's arrogance, really.
A
priori.
Right. So in this book, this book ended up convincing me, not the author's intention, but it ended up convincing me, maybe there's some kind of mind behind the universe after all. Maybe there's a God.
Yeah.
And so for a while, I had just been reading anti-religious stuff. After I left the church, I thought, well, I just need to like disabuse myself of all of my, crazy religious notions that I've had through my life.
For sure.
I just need to read the stuff against religion to kind of purge out the remaining religious illusions that I had. And so now I thought, why have I only been reading on one side? I want truth.
Yeah.
I should be looking on both sides. And a lot of times when people, like maybe they're in the church, they are only reading like apologetics or something, but then they encounter criticism and it ends up they only read criticism, right? They switch from one-sided approach to another one-sided approach, right? And that's what I had done.
Wait, are you suggesting that believers that maintain faith in the structured organization and liturgy and scripture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints actually have a well-rounded approach to their epistemology and that they're firing on all four cylinders? Dare I say Hansen 5 cylinders? You know what I'm saying? And not just on one or two, like logical positivism?
That's what I think we should do, yeah.
Do you endorse the Hansen 5 model of epistemology? Yes, you do. Thank you. I'll tell him that. So,
Oh my gosh.
Okay, moving on then.
Yeah.
So after I started to believe in God again, started wrestling with the question of God, I ended up believing in God again.
And did that come from just having not found a better option, or what brought you back to?
Well, okay. So I was wrestling with questions about the universe.
Yeah.
Right. But then that made me start to wrestle with things in my own life. So back when I was 17, when I was 18, and I had been going to the church archives, one day I had been leaving the church archives, headed to, the bus stop where I was take the bus every day home. And as I was about to walk out into the crosswalk, I had a voice in my mind say, don't walk out in front of that car.
Yeah.
And so there was a car that was just rounding through the intersection. I walked out in the street, but I stopped before I got into that car's lane. As that car passed in front of me, as I could see through the passenger front window, there was the driver, of course, and a front seat passenger. They were both hunched down. And just after they would have hit me, the driver popped his head up and looked at the road and then looked back down. So I thought, oh my gosh, like I almost just died. And so for years I had taken
Praise
that
God.
seriously, right, as
Yeah.
an evidence for God. Well, then I had kind of thought, well, there's got to be some other explanation because, God lets lots of people die. Why would God have saved me? There must be some other explanation. So I tried other explanations. Well, then once I started wondering if there was a God again, I started reconsidering this experience. I started actually going back to the spot in Salt Lake. I
Wow.
lived near there at the time, and seeing, okay, well, could I have known what was going to happen? And I realized I couldn't have known. This warning came from outside of me. Somebody saved my life. So not only is there a God, God cares, right? And so then I went through sort of further
Rock
steps.
on, dude.
From
I love
atheism,
that.
those are two massive steps to take.
Right.
Yeah.
So I explored different faiths. I explored the Baha'i faith, which is just like a really expansive faith, believes that all the faiths of the world were founded by prophets sent by God and so on.
Rock on. We like those guys.
Yeah. And then my youngest brother, Charles, died out of the blue. He was 25.
Oh, man.
And that, it just leveled me. And I believed in God, but I had real questions about like the afterlife. And as I was at his viewing and looked at his body there, I thought, this is the last time I'm going to see my brother. And that really got me searching about Christ. And so I read N.T. Wright's massive book, The Resurrection of the Son of God. Yeah. And he actually showed things about the origins of Christianity that there would have had, for the early Christians to believe that there would have been, that Jesus was resurrected, there would have not only needed to see him, but there would have had to be an empty tomb. And so then this makes a case, for the actual resurrection, right? And so I became a believer in Christ. And then all this time I had kept up my research on Mormon history. And I was doing research on the first vision, and I started to find evidence that the first vision actually had like temple elements, like straight up like Nauvoo endowment elements.
Oh, dude.
In the first vision. And this blew my mind, right? Because so I started seeing, so there are accounts of the first vision that are little known, and there are elements of the existing accounts that aren't focused on. Some of these suggest that there was a heavenly ascent aspect to the first vision, that not only does like
Who ascended? Joseph ascended?
right, that
Okay,
Joseph-
hold on. Before you get into that, bro, we were going to hard out at 44 minutes and we were
Right.
cruising at an hour and 15. We got more to go, but we got to end somewhere before we start this other cool subject with you.
So what I want to do is, so how much time do we have?
Couple minutes.
Negative.
So what I
5
want to do
minutes.
is wrap this up so that we can, in the later episode we'll do on the interpreters, I'm actually going to cover the temple stuff.
Rock
Awesome.
on.
Oh,
Hit it.
awesome.
So just finish your story about how you came back.
Right.
And then you never even answered my question. What was the coolest story that you found that debunks anti-Mormon claims? That'll be a third one we have to do.
No, that'll be the interpreters one. So,
rock on. Okay.
I have this in my head. I know what I'm doing.
Sick. Okay. So finish
like,
your
trust me,
story.
bro.
Finish your story about how you came back, and then we'll just end there.
So I was deliberately deflecting that to save it for that episode.
okay. Rock on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm a step ahead of you.
I never doubted. I never doubted. By the way, I love how our audience got to hear in real time just, how we basically just pre-produced our show in 30 seconds. Anyway, all right, keep going.
Okay. So as I started seeing evidence that we can talk about in a future episode about how the Nauvoo endowment was there in the first vision. It's there in what we can know about the lost pages that Joseph Smith is translating in 1828. It's there in the Book of Mormon text that we have that he translates in 1829. My mind was blown. I had been absolutely convinced that Joseph Smith did not know anything about the Nauvoo endowment until he becomes a Freemason in 1842.
Mm-hmm.
And so to find that, no, it's there in the 1820s. What? Yeah. And so this started raising all kinds of questions in my mind about this Joseph Smith character. I'd been thinking he was an opportunist. I started looking for evidence that I'd been asking this question over and over. What was in it for him? He would say something, he would do something. I'd ask, what was in it for him? So all my attention was directed to looking for opportunistic motives.
Yeah.
Right? Once I started asking a broader set of questions, right? Like, well, what things did he do to help other people? I started suddenly seeing all kinds of evidence. For instance, the man loved his family. He loved his family. So like you've got, the critics saying that like Joseph Smith, he was
a charlatan looking for my beauty.
He's just terrible to Emma and so on. We've got Joseph's journal from Nauvoo, not kept by Joseph, but kept by his private secretary, Willard Richards. And Richards writes about when Emma is sick, how Joseph is doting on her day after day, taking care of her, and how concerned Joseph seems to be about Emma's health.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Emma taking care of his mother the same way.
Yeah.
And we've got my favorite entry from Joseph's journal, spent the day sliding on the ice with my son Alexander.
Oh.
He's like the busiest man in Nauvoo, and he takes the entire day to slide on the ice on the Mississippi with his son. So I started seeing different aspects of this man, right? Goodness, the religious sincerity of the man. And I started asking myself, I thought, if I ask myself, what is the testimony of my life's experience in the restoration? Has this worked in my life? And I thought, of course. Of course it has. Like, I've had these historical questions, but this has worked in my own life.
Uh-huh.
And so now my historical stuff that I was finding was positive. I was realizing my life experience pointed to this. And so those two streams converged in me realizing that I was going back to the church.
Oh, wow.
Wow, rock on.
How long ago was that?
I'm beating Josh to the
That was
punch.
2010.
Praise
2010.
God. Praise God.
Yeah.
Beat you to the punch, bro.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Now, one thing I think is really fascinating about that is just as you were talking, describing the way that you changed what kind of questions you were asking. It's just the principle that Christ taught, that seek and ye shall find.
Mm-hmm.
If you are looking for bad intentions, if you're looking for everything wrong, you're probably going to find it.
If I start looking for bad intentions in you,
yeah,
if I start thinking, what
like he's just yoked with perfect hair and facial hair just to like flex on all of us.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I'm saying? And like he's such a narcissist.
No, but you're totally right. You will find them.
Yeah.
And you will find them, and it will wreck your relationships with the people that you're doing that with. And
And you can wreck your relationship with God the same way.
It can wreck your relationship with yourself.
Yes.
Like the worst death of whatever human relationship happens to these people when they go down this cruel and toxic and cynical road is how they can't live with themselves. And they're so angry about not being able to live in that duality they've created between their ego and their inner self that all of a sudden they have to lash out and destroy everything else around them. And it's like, bro, until you find that inner peace, dog, you're done.
And it's because they're seeking after darkness. But if, like you said, you start to seek for that which is good, you start looking, you're looking for the truth of things. Hey, why am I only reading these like negative things, right? What changed?
What in this has worked in my life? What in this is good?
Yeah.
Right. And like often when people are disillusioned, and I know this right from very personal experience.
Yeah.
We end up just looking for the bad, and we stop trying to look for the good, retain the good.
Yeah.
Well, how terrible, right? Because like you're going to lose whatever good was in this.
Yeah. Wow. So I love that kind of ended up happening naturally for you, that you started looking for, hey, what is good in this church history? What was good about Joseph Smith? And you started to actually see those things, because I think those who cannot see the good in him are generally blind to it.
Yeah, let him who has eyes to see, and whom has ears to
Exactly.
hear.
And how do you get those? By
Yeah.
opening up
Well, so
to the
here's my
Spirit.
last question. I've given up on trying to end this in a timely manner.
Sorry.
So, you know
I'm
what
ruining
saying?
it.
It's all good. The Canadian really came out in there with a sorry. I love it. That was really good. I'm going to take my sorry boot and we're going to go, you know, and say it was pretty awesome.
Go get some protein after this.
So,
yeah, you know what?
yeah. So I guess my last question would be, if there's anybody you feel that's listening who has a loved one or they themselves are going down this kind of cynical road. I think sometimes I never stop people from going. Actually, I shouldn't say I never stop people from going inactive. I should say that I believe that sometimes people just have to get it almost out of their system as part of like a natural process for a while. Okay. I'm blessed. I never had to. I consider it a spiritual gift of just having always had that emphatic trust in that vision. Right. But I recognize others, they're not the same. Everybody's different. Sometimes I think it's part of a natural process. Right. However, if there were somebody where it doesn't need to be a natural process, right, what advice would you give to somebody that you feel is in this scenario and is questioning?
So one thing I would say to people whose family members are questioning is first to recognize that people go through sort of predictable stages in this. So they will feel disillusioned. They will feel untrusting. They will be focused more on the bad than on the good. And if they're in the process of leaving, they may feel a need to act out against their previous identity in order to kind of acquire a new sense of identity. So,
like start rewriting their history in real time on social media.
They're going to start. Maybe they have their first beer or their first cup of coffee or whatever, or maybe they go online and they say things about general authorities with added obscenities or something because that seems funny at the time, right? Or something that's usually just a stage for people, and I think to me it's actually kind of an understandable stage, right? But for people who are going through that kind of struggle themselves, right, of having questions and doubts, I would say, for one, don't stop searching, right? Keep looking. I for a while, in some ways, I did stop searching, right? I was only reading on one side of the issue, right? But in other ways, I continued delving into the history, and ultimately, for me, that was enough to just the fact that I didn't give up on it was ultimately what allowed me to find things that just naturally brought me back. I would say, like we were saying earlier, hold on to, if there are things that you're critical of, if there are things that you see that, where you see negatives, okay, you see what you see, right? But don't let that distract you from, ask yourself, what are the positives? What are the things from this, from my Latter-day Saint upbringing, from my Latter-day Saint culture, from my Latter-day Saint religious experience? What are the things I do hold to here? What are the things that I do believe that I want to retain?
Like Chesterton's fence is what you're saying.
Yeah, make sure you don't lose touch with those. And then for me, a surprisingly big thing in my journey was actually practicing gratitude. This might sound kind of unrelated, but when someone is wrestling with their faith, that is such a difficult experience, especially if you also are having conflict with friends and family because of it, as well as inner conflict. That's so difficult that what happens, there's research to show that what happens when we become unhappy is we get kind of tunnel vision. And this is even true literally. They can do things in the lab to put people in a bad mood or a good mood, right?
Sure.
Oh, really?
And then they shine a light in front of them, but they also are shining lights in their peripheral vision, and they find out if the person can see the lights in their peripheral vision. People in a good mood have literally wider vision. They can actually see things over here.
Oh, wow.
People in a bad mood, they can't. They become more narrow. So if you've ever been depressed, you get you get tunnel vision emotionally. You can only, or if you're angry, you can only see things or think of things that make you mad, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is true physically, literally too. We get tunnel vision. So instead of letting yourself go emotionally just into a totally dark tunnel, do things that open your heart up, open you to help you stay in touch with happiness, right? And so one of these things for me was practicing gratitude. like keeping a daily gratitude journal, just writing down a few things I was grateful for that had happened and thinking about why I was grateful for them. That actually helped me, like while I was outside the church, it helped me to start taking a broader view of things, start asking a different set of questions, start connecting more with things that I did value. And it helped me to see that there were more options because I didn't have tunnel vision anymore. I saw that there were more options. And so I was able to figure things out and come to a better place. And the guy who has written the most about the psychology of gratitude, his name is Robert Emmons. Fantastic books, fantastic guy. I've had a chance to communicate with him. He's a non-Latter-day Saint Christian. And he told me that earlier in his life as a Christian, he used to have a lot of doubts. And then he started going to a church where they emphasized grace more. And as he started realizing more just what God had done for him and felt more gratitude, his doubts have disappeared. He says gratitude is a form of faith. Right? And so as we cultivate gratitude in ourselves, it can help us to stay on an even keel in our lives and in our spirituality, even as we wrestle with difficult issues in the church.
I love that.
Wow. Awesome.
Dude.
So we're going to keep this rolling, but we just got to take a break here. And check us out on wordradio.com.
Right